It took me several viewings, and only after I'd turned on closed captioning, to discern an indistinct voice during the final scene of Lady Bird. Can you hear it? Listen closely. That voice, though we can't make out her words, belongs to Marion McPherson, Lady Bird's mother. Her voice's inclusion here is somewhat strange, given that she isn't in the scene, except as part of Lady Bird's mixed memory and imagination. Lady Bird, filled with a newfound gratitude, leaves her parents a voicemail. She directs her words to her mom, from whom she's been estranged because of her move to New York. And with these words, Lady Bird, now again Christine, honors the bond with the woman who gave her life and loves her. Not only a heartfelt conclusion to a touching tale, the final scene helps situate the film within a broader conversation about women's literary tradition. The film's acclaimed writer and director, Greta Gerwig, knows this tradition all too well. She graduated from Barnard College with degrees in English and philosophy, and all 10 of her favorite novels were penned by women. In this video, I'm going to show how Lady Bird responds to this tradition, specifically as it concerns mothers and daughters. While mothers create their daughters by birthing and rearing them, daughters may create their mothers by giving them new life in art. This backwards creation becomes all the more important and difficult when considering how many women, including mothers, never had the chance to create their own works. The challenge for artistic daughters, then, is to craft the very maternal tradition that they must, in their works, respond to and transform. That Lady Bird dialogues with other women's writing becomes apparent at the film's start. Gerwig opens with a quote from Joan Didion, a late writer who, like Gerwig herself, was born in Sacramento. While this quote helps establish the film's setting and tone, it is not Didion whom I intend to discuss. Instead, I want to focus on Virginia Woolf.
Virginia Woolf! Virginia Woolf.
Virginia Woolf? Tell me more.
You know what Virginia Woolf book this reminds me of?
Frances, Undateable.
Woolf, a prominent writer of the late 19th and early 20th century movement known as literary modernism, appears on Gerwig's list of top 10 books. Specifically, Gerwig marks Woolf's 1927 novel, To the Lighthouse, as a favorite. Haunted by the memory of her mother, who died when she was just 13, Woolf crafted the novel, in large part, to deal with that haunting. This maternal ghost informed the character Mrs. Ramsay, a mother who dies during the novel. In the novel's final section, a painter named Lily at last completes the portrait of Mrs. Ramsay that she had begun a decade prior. Impressively, Lily persisted in her artistry despite the protests of a young man, representative of their broader misogynistic society, who claimed that women can neither write nor paint. Despite her resultant self-doubts, Lily completes the task. 2 years later, Woolf publishes A Room of One's Own, an essay that continues to explore how society inhibits women artists. Woolf asserts that a woman must have money and a room of her own in order to write fiction. Historically, with little to no access to education or financial independence, and with patriarchy mandating that, above all, they must serve their husbands and children, even the most privileged women have been barred from the pursuit of hidden dreams, including writing. At one point, Woolf performs a thought experiment. What if Shakespeare had had a sister, called Judith, with as much innate genius as he? As Woolf muses, her restless nature would have led her to resist marriage and to flee to London, where, like her brother, she would attempt to pursue a career in theater. But unlike her brother, she would not succeed. Those in the theater scene, all men, would laugh at her and bar her entrance. In financial desperation, she would likely have to take up with one of the men, and likely, she would become pregnant. Experiencing such turmoil in her inability to live according to her nature, she would most likely, as Woolf concludes, take her own life. But Woolf's essay is not without hope. Despite their disadvantages, women have managed to write, discussing, among others, the likes of Jane Austen, the Bronte sisters, and George Eliot, who, by the way, penned Gerwig's #1 favorite novel, Middlemarch. Woolf begins to establish a women's literary tradition. The early writers of this lineage are all the more remarkable because they had no tradition behind them, or one so short and partial that it was of little help. For we think back through our mothers, if we are women. By the end of the essay, Woolf calls upon an audience of young women who have gained privileges unknown to their predecessors to write. In so doing, they may give new life to their lost biological and literary mothers. Women writers have come a long way, but what about women in cinema? While women who want to become directors have more opportunity now than ever before, their chances still aren't particularly great. A 2023 study by USC Annenberg, which analyzed the top 1,600 North American films from 2007 to 2022, found the following by way of director representation. While white men directed a whopping 80.4% of these films, white women only directed 4.4%. It's even worse when you factor in race. While men from underrepresented groups directed merely 14% of the films, women from underrepresented groups directed a depressingly low total of 1.3%. Furthermore, in the 95-year history of the Oscars, only 7 women have ever been nominated for directing. Just 3 have won, all in recent years. Kathryn Bigelow in 2010, Chloe Zhao in 2021, and Jane Campion in 2022. This extreme underrepresentation of women in cinema, and especially women of color, is embarrassing, to say the least. One can understand why a woman may hesitate to become a director.
I've always wanted to direct, and I never felt ready. I never felt like I had enough experience, enough time, enough hours under my belt, enough time being on set and around directors. And then I thought, it's time to jump.
Gerwig made the jump, and I'm so happy she did.
Primarily the relationship that I'm interested in is her and her mother.
Because Lady Bird tends to take center stage in this film about a mother-daughter relationship, it can be hard to discern that the story also belongs to Marion. As Lady Bird strives to fall in love, become popular, and move to New York, Marion journeys alongside her, all the while facing her own struggle to let her daughter go. Her love's labor is often eclipsed, as a mother's often is. She works, she cooks, she buys and sews dresses, she takes in her son's girlfriend, and she keeps her family afloat amidst financial insecurity. She has a lot on her plate, and one of Lady Bird's keys to growing up resides in her giving her mom and other loved ones proper attention. This learned attention will inform the art that Lady Bird, presumably one day, will produce. A la Virginia Woolf, Gerwig's film puts artistry in dialogue with maternal lineage.
My mother was an abusive alcoholic.
While we don't know Marion's origin story, we sense that her circumstances were less privileged than those of her daughter, and if she did at one point want to become an artist, we doubt she would have had much opportunity to do so. During her period of estrangement with Lady Bird, she tries to write her letter after letter, discarding each draft out of fear her daughter would judge her writing ability, a sign that Marion is likely less educated. Luckily, her husband recovers the letters and gives them to Lady Bird, who reads them upon arrival in New York. We get the sense that, whatever line of art Lady Bird decides to pursue, it will always be informed by the life of her mother. She may breathe new life into her mother's fragmented words, and through such mysterious creation, mother and daughter may become one. If this seems strange, consider Gerwig's own writing. While she has made it clear that she and Lady Bird are not the same person, she no less imbued this story with details from her life and lineage. An important detail: the name of Gerwig's mother, like Lady Bird, is Christine. Mothers create daughters, but then daughters may also create mothers.
Is there a story out there that you've longed to see a retelling of?
The Bible, but from the point of view of all the women.
Lady Bird is not a religious film, but Catholicism comprises an integral part of the character's world. Beyond honoring the compassion of this world, Gerwig uses the Catholic concept of the Trinity to construct her vision of women's artistic creation. In this vision, Gerwig, as the film's hidden architect, is God the Father, while Christine, emphasis on Christ, is God the Son. Christine calls herself Lady Bird, which connects to the third face of God, the Holy Spirit, often depicted as a dove. Together, they comprise the three-faced God of creation. But that's not all. We can't forget Marion, or Mary, the Mother of God, often eclipsed by the Trinity, but arguably just as important. For just as God creates her, she creates God. In Lady Bird terms, Gerwig creates the characters Christine and Marion, just as Marion, Christine's mother, has created her. Ironically, in insisting her name is Lady Bird, Christine maintains a place in the essential creative structure, and when this holy bird flies away, we get the sense she's still carrying it all with her. By the film's end, she accepts her name, Christine, thus embracing her status as the daughter component of the Trinity, inextricable from the other parts. At the end of A Room of One's Own, Woolf calls on an audience of young women to keep working. She holds that lost women artists still live in the present lives of women, whose collective work may give them new bodily form. Referencing again Judith Shakespeare, Woolf writes, "Now my belief is that this poet, who never wrote a word and was buried at the crossroads, still lives. She lives in you and me, and in many other women who are not here tonight, for they are washing up the dishes and putting the children to bed. But she lives, for great poets do not die. They are continuing presences. They need only the opportunity to walk among us in the flesh. But I maintain that she would come if we worked for her." This is an almost spiritual, altogether hopeful call on Woolf's part. She calls on women to work together to recover a lost maternal literary lineage, and they may do so by writing their own stories and the stories of the many women who never had the chance. This vision, I think, is at the center of Lady Bird. Gerwig the artist writes the story of an artistic young woman, all the while highlighting her status as a daughter who carries with her a lineage of those who lacked her opportunity. Now she just needs the time and space to listen, to hear that indistinct voice she either remembers or imagines, ready to give it new bodily form. I'll end this essay not with my own words, but with those of Marion, taken from her discarded letters. Though fragmented, these words carry on. Dear Lady Bird, when I got pregnant with you, it was a miracle. I was older. I was about 42 and we had Miguel, and it seemed like it would never happen. And then you arrived. I loved you without knowing you. I loved you when you were just barely an idea. When you arrived at 7 p.m., after 12 hours of labor, I recognized you. I knew that you were my girl. Watching you grow up has been one of the most wonderful adventures of my life. You were always you, stubborn and funny and loving and competitive and brilliant. I wish we could be friends, and I don't know when it started to go off the tracks. I want to tell you I love you, but